AI, artificial intelligence, considered by many to be an existential threat to humanity. But even before any of that, on this road to extinction, a clear and present danger has emerged. Data centers. This week, why you've been hearing so much about them lately, and what's the problem? I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. On each episode of my weekly podcast, a different topic, discussion, commentary, or story from our lives.
Season 20, Chapter 12, Data Centers.
To properly understand data centers, we must first understand that they've been around for centuries. They used to be called libraries. Libraries, sometimes massive storage rooms of the world's knowledge and thought, ink to paper. Sure, we lost a lot of trees along the way, but overall, net gain. Because now we had documented evidence of the human race and our many advancements. We had libraries. No longer was information passed down through generations by word of mouth, filed away in unreliable memories, and retold with our penchant for exaggeration. No sirree, Bob, now we had printed proofs that could be referenced and cited. I know that's true because I read it in a book. Yes, the library, not just a place where the homeless can go to warm up in January. If you're like me and you've straddled two different centuries, you may remember when we started to hear about compacted information, an entire encyclopedia on microfilm. Can you imagine massive archives of newspapers on microfiche readers at the library? Why, I heard that spies were smuggling secret documents across enemy borders on microdots. Mission impossible. Today, all of that information is on a computer chip. It depends on the kind of chip, but one chip can hold up to 2 terabytes of data. What does that mean? Well, 2 terabytes of data could be 500,000 photos, plus 800 hours of Zoom meetings. You could download and watch 20 full-length 4K Ultra HD movies, 5,000 hours of high-fidelity music and podcasts, all that and more every day. That's 2 terabytes. So, if one little chip can hold all of that, why are the modern digital data centers so huge? Short answer, because there's 8 billion of us on the planet. And the world runs 24/7, 365. It runs on billions and billions of traditional computers and about 7 billion smartphones. And we create massive amounts of new data every day. If everyone in the world wrote 3 new books every day, how big would a library have to be? Well, that's kind of what's happening. And it's even bigger than that. And a library can curate its book collection. Sorry, we don't have In a Nutshell by Larry Fedoruk. But our data, we need all of it all the time, at least the access to it. So big data is not just every library in the world now accessed at your fingertips, but it's 20 million new YouTube videos every day, CCTV footage on every block around the world, Facebook, Google, banking, retail, healthcare, government, military, self-driving cars, and rockets to the moon. All that is data. Sure, the capacity to hold information on a microcomputer chip is incomparably massive to the amount of information on a page from a book. We were able to shrink that down, but what grew and is growing uncontrollably is the amount of information we now digitize, and we demand it. We want our machines to know everything about the Franco-Prussian War, find the best recipe for butter chicken, deliver packages to our door, and explain why John Travolta wore that beret to the film festival at Cannes. We want our movies and our music and our videos and our photos. And since we all can't have 2 terabytes on our phone, we ask the cloud to hang on to it for us. The cloud is like a personal access storage bin. It's for stuff we don't use every day, but we don't want to throw it out either. The cloud is data. It's on a chip in a machine, just not your machine. And sometimes we lose sight of just how many machines are needed to hold all of that. Data, it's for you, it's for me, it's for the billions of individuals not to mention large organizations like medicine, government, military, Facebook, Google, telecommunications, NASA, SpaceX. The list goes on. Not only do we need all that data, but it has to be translated into 100 different languages, because we can't agree on one. So this means we already have large data centers. These are microchips that are in machines, and machines that are stacked on machines all the way up to the ceiling. And then rows and rows of those stacks that fill an entire warehouse. The game changer, and why you're hearing so much more about data centers now, regenerative AI. AI is data on steroids. And on a side note, there's also quantum computing. I'm not an expert, but if a regular computer thinks in sequencing with zeros and ones, quantum computers think using quantum mechanics. And they can make literally millions of calculations all at the same time, as opposed to sequentially. That's going to mean not only new hardware, but more data. They've already started talking about the possibility of Q-Day, which they say could happen anytime in the next 2 to 10 years. I'm betting sooner than later. Q-Day will happen when quantum computing is so fast and massive and smart that it will literally figure out every security system and password in the world, rendering all our protections useless. Hey, so if you need something else besides AI to be frightened of, think about Q-Day. Now, some people put it in the Y2K category of bogus concerns, but others do not. Beware of Q-Day. But in the meantime, back to regenerative AI, solving our problems, answering all our questions, taking our jobs, doing all of our thinking for us, even becoming emotionally involved with us. So who needs another human ever for anything? How much more data does that generate? One can only imagine. How many more chips? How many more machines? How many more stacks? How many more rows? How many more warehouses? The main companies into AI and colossal data centers, they are the usual suspects, the companies whose business has been data for the last 20 years. They even have a new term for them now. They're called the hyperscalers. Meta, Facebook, Alphabet, Google, Microsoft, Oracle, and Amazon. That's a partial list, and it's only the Americans. This is going on a worldwide basis, including private industry and governments. There's at least a dozen that have been recently built or are building in Canada. The data centers they want to build now are beyond gargantuan. Remember that visual of stacks of machines and rows and rows and rows in large rooms? Well, some of these warehouse rooms are 700,000 square feet. And not only that, there's multi-levels of these rooms. And the companies that I just mentioned don't just want to build more rooms. They want to build data center campuses, i.e. many buildings, so that a data campus could cover an area of about 7 million square feet. That's over 160 acres. Even that's hard to imagine. I don't know how many football fields that would be, but it's a lot. Well, here's the thing. Picture a big city like New York or Toronto, and then picture over 50 blocks in the city. 50 blocks. That'll cover about 160 acres. So each data center is like a small city just full of machines and 3, 4, 5 stories high. And that's a lot of real estate. And it can't be found in a New York or a San Francisco or Chicago, or maybe it can, but it would be cost prohibitive even for those big companies. So you know what they're doing? They're combing the countryside. They've moved in like 21st century robber barons to these smaller communities, promising industry, jobs, prosperity. What we're going to do with your little failing town here is repurpose it. They love the rural and suburban communities that aren't doing so well and have cheap land. Why isn't the town doing well? It could be anything. The coal mine closed. The highway was relocated. The farming community moved away. So big tech just comes in and buys up all this land cheap because good times ahead. And at first blush, it does look great. Christ the Savior has come to redeem us. The future is finally here in one-horse town America. What could be the downside? Well, here we go. First, all of those promised jobs, they are mostly in construction. And in a couple of years, when the data center is built, all those jobs go away. And the data center itself, no matter how big it is, can be run with about 100 people. And most of those have to be MIT computer scientists. In other words, nobody from the nearby town is likely to get a job at the plant. Secondly, large data centers use up a tremendous amount of local resources. They use massive amounts of water as a cooling system, sometimes depleting or limiting the local supply of fresh water. Great, we have a fancy data center on the edge of town, but we're only allowed to shower once a week. They keep massive, often underground tanks of dangerous diesel fuel and natural gas, which they use for backup generators. Those often leak fumes into the air, and you need the generators in case the power goes down. Speaking of biggest issue, the large amount of power they need. It's a strain on local power grids. Plus, they use up so much power that the overall demand increases. And when demand increases, so do the prices. You and I are trying to save a few bucks by shutting out the lights every time we leave a room. Means jack when data centers are causing the power to go up, up, and up, and up. Almost humorously, if it wasn't so sad, which is the case with many things, Trump, Donald said he was going to pass a new bill to demand that these companies build their own power grid when they are building their data center.
Tonight, I'm pleased to announce that I have negotiated the new Ratepayer Protection Pledge. You know what that is? We're telling the major tech companies that they have the obligation to provide for their own power needs. They can build their own power plants as part of their factory.
So maybe this sounds like a good idea, but is anyone asking, you built your own grid, but what grid is going to supply the power to your grid? You still need power, extra power. Where is it coming from? Is there extra sun, wind, fossil fuels, hydro, nukes? I don't think so. Unless Amazon is building a data center and they're also building their own nuclear reactor and they're buying up their own uranium, then your own grid means nothing. Large data centers will be sucking up power that we don't have. As big companies grow their AI, there's going to be a greater demand for AI itself, which is going to take even more power. In Canada, our power demands will actually double in the next 25 years. Our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, recently said that we're also going to double our grid in that time in accordance.
So we will double our grid. That's the headline. Canada will double its electricity generation over the course of the next 2 decades. Because the path to affordability is electrification. The path to competitiveness is electrification. The path to net zero is electrification. Electrification underpins everything.
Same question. Where's that power coming from? The sun can shine all day, the oil can flow, but you're going to need a new grid. And if you build that grid, at some point that grid is going to suck power from another grid. Where is the power coming from? Why do we continue to build massive data centers that will demand much more power? Power that we could be using to heat our hovels, light our way, or cook our food. Why are we sucking up all this energy to build a data center when I won't even be able to recharge my phone? I see that as a problem. How about noise pollution? Cooling fans and massive backup generators, they run continually, and they generate persistent low-frequency hums that cause significant residential distress. You have a headache, your teeth hurt, and your hair starts to fall out. And what about the visual pollution, the aesthetic? Data centers are often large, monolithic, windowless, soulless, white structures built on acres of paved-over green space. They often lower the property values of land nearby. Nobody wants to live right next to the sawmill or downwind from the pig farm. This is that, but worse. And lastly, big tech often makes secretive deals with non-disclosure agreements with local governments. And they're given big tax breaks that put the tax burden back on the local residents. And they offer no transparency when called upon by the locals. Locals whose teeth are falling out and whose children can't sleep. Heard enough? It is no wonder people are protesting in the streets and at local councils.
While developers say their construction will bring both jobs and tax revenue, they're facing opposition across the state.
Proposed data centers are getting pushback.
I don't like it, but guess what? We're going to keep fighting.
Targets for complaints, AI data centers, both proposed and already under construction.
Dozens of residents made their way inside the auditorium at Valley View High School for a public hearing on data centers.
Signs that read data centers are bad, just chat GPT it, and our water is not for data consumption ahead of the Borough Council meeting.
Also new tonight, residents are fired up, fighting to keep a data center from coming to their community.
This data center proposal has become somewhat controversial here.
State and local leaders met with community members in Lackawanna County today to discuss the proposed billion-dollar investments by bringing data centers.
Scott, hundreds of acres across our area may soon be turned into data centers.
Even your friend and mine, Mr. Wonderful Kevin O'Leary, would be a small player in the overall big game of data centers, but he's trying to cash in by building a large data campus in Utah. And when protesters there organized, he accused them of being financially backed by the communists.
Who would want us to stop building our electrical grid? Who would want to stop us from having compute capacity to develop AI? Which adversary would want that? There's only one. It's China.
Kevin O'Leary, I guess that honors Bachelor of Environmental Studies degree you got back 50 years ago doesn't mean much now? Yeah, Mr. Dreadful blames the Chinese. When the protesters were organized by a couple of homegrown young Utah women and their group called Alliance for a Better Utah.
Is Alliance for a Better Utah funded by the Chinese government?
No. I would probably get paid a lot more if I was, I would hope, if I were doing some foreign international espionage. But no, we are not. We're funded by a lot of grassroots donors and a lot of people from around Utah that believe in what we do. And that's as simple as that.
Data centers. Huge, unsightly, polluting, energy-sucking structures willing to destroy the planet so that we can have an intelligence that can destroy the people on it. What are we doing here? Well, there's money in it. In thinking about all this, my mind went back to the early days of massive computers. Some of us century straddlers still make the jokes about these big computers who took up so much space compared to how little they could do. Remember all the old footage of men in white lab coats pictured in front of walls and walls of machines with blinking lights, rows of complicated push buttons, spools of reel-to-reel tape going forward and in reverse. Wow, the future! The first big digital data center was actually at the University of Pennsylvania, circa mid-1940s. University of Pennsylvania were big into computing. They created the very first electronic vacuum tube device. It was called ENIAC, ENIAC, Electronic Numerical Integrator and Computer, ENIAC. People say that if not for ENIAC, we would never have had Apple or Microsoft or Google today. The U.S. military commissioned the use of ENIAC for complicated calculations based on firing ranges of the new large long guns. That's true. So I guess if the United States wasn't constantly trying to figure out a more efficient way to kill people, we would have never had Facebook. Way to go. If you YouTube ENIAC, it is fun to see the rows and rows of tubes and wires upon wall after wall, and all that just to do some military math. And as I said earlier, we've shrunk the machines, but we overgrew the data. So now we've come full circle. Again, we need to house our computers in big, big rooms. Rooms of computers to do our bidding. Or I guess for us to do theirs.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. Larry Fedoruk 37 at gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.